Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this story, Naruto is a one-man team. After graduating from the academy, Naruto starts to reveal his true self. Won't everyone be surprised at what the demon can do? Powerful Naruto X Harem. Be sure to check the description for the creator of the great fanfic and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to this channel. Now let's start the story. Chapter 13 In the Forest. Disclaimer: maybe someday I'll own rights to my own manga anime series. Some of the interactions in this chapter may seem slightly disturbing, but again we are not up to the worst, so don't think I'm going to suddenly toss anything in without warning. Due to many people's suggestion, I will be putting in a warning at the rape scene so that those that do not want to read it will know where to skip. That won't be coming up until, at earliest, chapter 16, so we have some time yet. 3 days later found teams 8 and 10 bounding through the forest, keeping a solemn watch for anything out of the ordinary. Hinata had recovered from her shock enough to function, but they could all tell she was still distraught over what happened. Naruto explained to her everything that went on while she was so blissfully unaware, and she was thankful that she didn't have to see her love torture someone. That thought was only solidified when she saw the blanching faces of her teammates as they recalled the events. She was also grateful that she wasn't the only one who had killed, and felt like she and her teammates bonded a little more, though in a grim way, from all having their first kills that same day. The only kill that wasn't a first was from Naruto, whose kill had died when he hit a tree after the clone exploded, breaking his neck. In their brief travel they managed to take out 2 more teams and dissuade another from engaging with such a large group, and as such they now had a full extra set of scrolls with an earth scroll on the side. They had all felt a large chakra presence the day before, but shrugged it off so long as it stayed away from them. Now, traveling through the treetops, they saw what looked like a small clearing ahead with a few people in it. Naruto turned to the others and whispered out to them, "We'll take a closer look, but keep yourselves hidden and don't engage unless I say." They nodded to him and jumped as close as they dared, taking up positions on one side of the clearing, far above the gathering. Down below they saw the 3 sound genin facing off against Ino, Shikamaru and Choji as they stood between the sound team and Sakura, who was looking rather worn and beaten. They couldn't hear too well what the exchange was, but it eventually led to a bit of a scuffle in which it seemed the sound genin were out for blood. The fight progressed until a couple more Konoha genin showed up. One Tenten and the other Neji. Naruto could tell just from Neji's stance and attitude that he was almost as much of a prick as Sasuke, but before the two could engage, Neji smirked. "Looks like we won't have to," they heard him say as a lone figure crawled out of a hollowed section of a tree. "Sakura, who did that to you?" the Uchiha asked as he made his presence known. A dark aura of purple smoke seemed to drift off his body while odd marks shifted over his skin. Sakura was beside herself with glee that Sasuke was thinking about her. She was so caught up in the moment that she forgot to answer him, but that didn't matter. "Ha. I did. What are you going to do about it, Uchiha?" The guy that had been blowing wind out of his palms stepped forward with an evil smile. "Zaku, you idiot." The bandaged one yelled at him, but before either of them could react, Sasuke was already going through hand signs and blew out several balls of fire. "I'll smash him to bits, Dosu." "Zankaha." Zaku cried out, extinguishing the flames only to reveal the shuriken hidden inside of them. He quickly threw a guard up to lessen the blow. "Zaku. Behind you." Again it came too late as Zaku's arms were pulled painfully behind his back while Sasuke planted a foot on his spine. "You seem very proud of these arms." Sasuke grinned and pulled slowly, reveling in the other boy's pain as he pulled the arms out of their sockets and tore the tendons. They could see Sakura practically drooling at this point as she saw the power of her Sasuke-kun. Naruto whispered to those still hidden, "Something isn't right. There's no way he's that powerful, and those marks." They all agreed but didn't move as Naruto hadn't given them any signal to. "Shino, Hinata, what can you tell me about him? He seems to have a different chakra going through him. His system can't handle all of it and it's leaking out." Hinata looked astonished as she had never seen chakra pour out of someone like what was happening in front of them. "His chakra is tainted," Shino announced, only bringing up more questions in Naruto's mind. Back down in the clearing, the bandaged genin was frantically trying to reason with the Uchiha. His 2 teammates were down and he had little hope of winning with this new development. "Here, take our scroll and we will leave you be. I promise the next time we meet we will not run." Sasuke didn't seem to hear him as he was busy looking at his own hands and feeling the power rushing through them. Dosu took this as a good sign and gathered his team before making a hasty retreat, which Tenten and Neji took as their cue to grab their teammate and retreat as well. Sasuke looked up and was about to follow but found that two arms were wrapped around him. Sakura was hugging him from behind and pleading for him not to go. Sakura, let go of me. I need to test my power. No, you're not leaving me here. I want you to stay here with me, please. She begged him and he looked into her eyes. She wasn't looking at him with fear or sadness. No, it was something much more primal. She was looking at him with lust. There are other ways to test this strength. If I breed one of these sluts with this power active, I'll have even stronger Uchiha under my command in the future. He spun on his heel and quicker than they could step away he had both Sakura and Ino under his arms and carried them to the hollow in the tree, making those gathered wonder what he was doing. They didn't have to wait long though, as they heard tearing cloth followed by shrieking and giggling that could only be Sakura. Inside the hollow, Ino could only watch as her former best friend was mauled savagely by their crush. She was no idiot, she knew that he planned on her being next. This is what I wanted, right? For Sasuke-kun to love me and to have his children. But what about dating? What about kissing and walking hand in hand down the street? This isn't romantic, this is disgusting. I don't want this. I don't want it. No. As she finished, she tried to leave the hollow, but the only thing those outside saw was a streak of platinum blonde and a shriek as she was pulled forcefully back inside before she screamed. It stopped suddenly with the sound of flesh meeting flesh. Sasuke looked at her with what she could only describe as loathing. You will help me revive my clan. I, as the last Uchiha, demand it. Now take off your clothes or I will do it for you, just like I did with this other slut. Rubbing her cheek where Sasuke smacked her, Ino looked past him to Sakura, who was moaning, but from pleasure or pain she couldn't tell. Either way the girl was smiling. The only thing she could tell was that he hadn't used her yet since she still had her panties on. He had stopped himself long enough to grab her and force her back inside. She began to sob. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. He was supposed to love me, not this. She looked at him and saw a promise of pain in his eyes as he took a kunai from his pouch and stabbed it into the wood by her head. Tears fell as she slowly began to remove articles of clothing, starting with her top and skirt. Up in the trees, Naruto had a clear view of what had transpired and he was furious. He warned Kiba about taking such actions, but it seemed he should have warned the Uchiha as well. He saw Sakura was practically in heat, but Ino didn't look the part. That suspicion was confirmed when he saw her trying to escape only to be drawn back inside the hollow while everyone else stared at it in shocked silence. Damn it. Naruto shot out of the tree, breaking everyone's days as his friends soon followed. Once they landed, Naruto wasted no time as he took off towards the hollow. Ino was now down to her panties just like Sakura and had full-blown streams running down her face as Sasuke reached out and roughly grabbed her exposed breasts. He handled them with no sigh of gentleness, bringing more tears from her as well as yelps of pain, but he didn't care. He only had one thing on his mind, and that was to breed and gain more power. Retrieving his kunai from the tree, he moved to slice open the girl's last piece of clothing. The sound of rushing feet stopped him as he looked out towards the clearing and snarled, scaring Ino and making Sakura's panties darken from the dampness that now permeated them. Naruto. Sasuke snarled as both girls were forgotten and he rushed out from the tree towards the object that his hatred for was only overshadowed by his hatred for his brother. Naruto saw the boy coming at him with his Sharingan blazing and the strange black marks still covering half his body. They met halfway across the clearing in a clash of fists faster than their onlookers could follow. When they separated, the small crowd could see that neither had landed a hit. Sasuke smirked as he looked around the clearing at the new arrivals. Oh, how thoughtful of you, Dobi. You brought more breeding stock for me. I'll make sure to thank you properly after they've all been bedded. That is, if you survive. If you lay one hand on any of them, I will knock your ass back to the council chamber and let them hear that you tried to rape your fellow Konoha ninja during the exam. I'm sure the Hokage would love that. Ha. The council would pat me on the back for starting my clan's revival so soon, and then there would be nothing your precious old man could do about it. In fact, maybe after I'm done here I'll go and kick him off his throne and take his title for myself. Sasuke grinned at the thought of taking the Dobe's dream away from him, but couldn't resist pouring a little salt in the wound, so he pointed directly at Hinata. And I'll make sure she is first to sit on my lap. Everyone was astonished that Sasuke just admitted to not only wanting to overthrow the Hokage, but also wanting to rape all the girls present. Well, all but Sakura, whose moans could still be heard every once in a while. What's the matter, Dobi? Afraid that I might be a better man for your little girlfriend. Kiba had just returned to the clearing in time to hear Sasuke's threats against Hinata's innocence. You bastard. You said we were going to take him out together and that I would get Hinata. He ran at Sasuke but was batted away like a fly. Shut up, mutt. Know your place. Everyone was backing up to the edges of the clearing now. They could feel the dangerous aura welling up, but it wasn't coming from Sasuke. You couldn't leave well enough along, could you, Uchiha? Sasuke turned back towards Naruto to see that his face was hidden by his hair and he was standing stock still with an oppressive chakra leaking from him. Oh, so you grew some balls since I last saw you, huh? Too bad they still won't be enough to satisfy your little Hyuga or the ice bitch, but don't worry, I'll take good care of them for you. Sasuke entered his fighting stance and got ready for the inevitable clash as Naruto just stood there. Come on, Dobi, don't chicken out now. You see, you whores. He doesn't even have the nerve to come at an Uchiha. I'll just have to go to him. Sasuke ran full speed at the blonde and executed a perfect flying roundhouse to his head only to hit nothing but air. As he came down he saw Naruto appear beside him, but before he could react the boy batted him to the side just like he had done to Kiba moments before. Don't question what you know nothing about, Tem. Again Naruto disappeared only to show up once again above Sasuke's head. The Uchiha dodged the axe kick in time, thanks to his eyes, but missed the follow-up double-fisted hammer that pounded him into the dirt as Naruto completed his flip. He wasn't given a second to collect his thoughts though, as he was roughly picked up by the back of his clothes and thrown sideways into a tree, causing it to dent and crack. Those still watching the fight stood rooted as they watched the show of raw power. None of them realized though that Naruto hadn't even begun to show his real strength. For one, he still had his weight seals on. Neither had he unsheathed a blade or used any jutsu. It was raw power, and the only ones who could have really appreciated it were the teammates of the spandex-wearing wonder, all three of which were no longer there. Naruto walked over to the tree that Sasuke was now climbing out of and brought some pieces of paper out of his pouch. He quickly slapped them on the Uchiha and watched as the black marks started to recede. So it's chakra-based and seems to be originating at his neck. He waited until all the marks flowed back towards the cursed mark, then removed the seals, leaving a wobbling Sasuke behind him as he walked away. Get back here, Dobi. Don't run away from me. Give me back my power. Sasuke put an arm on Naruto's shoulder to stop him and was rewarded with an unforgiving fist to the face, causing him to sprawl out on the ground unconscious from the force of the blow as well as his sudden lack of chakra. Sakura, having heard her precious Avenger's cry, rushed out of the hollow towards him. As she saw Naruto walking away from her love, it was blatantly obvious what happened. Naruto Baka must have used a sneak attack on him. How dare he do such an underhanded thing to Sasuke-kun? She swung out at him as she passed, but was soon laying out next to her little boy toy even faster than she expected due to a leg swipe by her intended target. Naruto didn't even break his stride, nor did he even seem concerned about what he had done to the almost naked girl, as he walked over to the hollow. As soon as he got inside he saw a wide-eyed and shaking Ino plastered against the back of the cave as she seemingly tried to meld with the root system. Once she saw it was him that came in and not her prior assailant, she rushed across the hollow and into his arms. He could have been an enemy ninja at this point and she wouldn't have cared, just as long as he wouldn't do what the Uchiha had. She had seen most of what Naruto had done to the brat through blurry eyes, and most of it had amazed her since she had never seen him so strong. Even when he had acted out in the classroom right before team selection, he hadn't actually done anyone real harm. She watched as much as she could though from her perch against the tree, and she had to admit she would have been impressed if she wasn't so scared. Even when he tripped Sakura he did it with so little effort, and even his eyes had never left their target. The whole time he walked he seemed to be staring right at her. What was this feeling that she couldn't shake? She couldn't breathe right and she felt hot, but it wasn't fear. It wasn't until he had entered the small, semi-private area that she felt the full weight of what had happened wash over her, and she suddenly desired to hold on to something, anything that she could, to feel that she wasn't alone. That thing just happened to be Naruto. The boy stood rather embarrassed as Ino latched onto him. He had barely moved into the area when she practically jumped on him and started crying into his shoulder, but that didn't bother him. No, it was that she had done so in nothing but her panties. It wasn't difficult for him to figure out what had happened, or was about to happen, inside this area, and he suddenly wondered just how often he would end up saving a girl from being nearly raped. After all, he was already a 2 for this exam. Turning his head towards the cave entrance, he called outside in hope those that he wanted to hear would hear him shout. "Hinata, Haku Harum. Come in here please. The rest of you stay out unless you want to be sent to Dreamland." They soon heard rushed footsteps as the 3 girls came into the hollow and saw Ino hugging him tightly. At first Haku and Hinata were a bit angry, but then they recalled the tearing sounds, and the screaming, the actions of Sasuke and Sakura. They came up to the pair and slowly peeled Ino off of Naruto, being careful to keep her modesty as best they could, though they hadn't needed to, as Naruto had screwed his eyes shut as soon as they started separating. Once he was freed, he turned his back to them before addressing them. "Get her dressed and try to calm her down a little. I need to go deal with the rest." He didn't wait for their approval as he left to see how the others were doing. Out in the clearing, Kiba was busy kicking the down Uchiha. While the unconscious Sakura held onto him tightly, moving in time with the motions his body was involuntarily making. In a word, the whole scene was rather disgusting to him. Not that Kiba was kicking his down teammate, that part he found hilarious, but the pink-topped bitch's blind devotion to the raven-haired boy was what he found sickening. What kind of person gets off on being nearly raped, then tries to go back for more? He motioned Kiba over as he walked to Shino, Shikamaru and Choji. The dog boy gave one last kick before reluctantly joining the other guys. The first questions were of course about the missing Ino, which Naruto was reluctant to answer. He left it at that she was a bit abused and that they shouldn't bring it up with her until she's had a chance to speak to a specialist. To his comfort, her teammates seemed to understand and nodded that they wouldn't bring the issue up. "What do we do with the other 2 then?" Kiba asked with a slight scowl. He was now the only conscious member of Team 7 and it didn't look like the other 2 would be getting up anytime soon. "We'll have to take them to the tower with us. That, or you can stay here until they wake up and try to get another scroll in order to pass." He watched as Kiba huffed and stomped off, clearly not happy with either option. He then turned to Shikamaru. "Which scroll does your team have?" A simple comment, but it immediately put both Choji and Shikamaru on edge. They were ready to fight over their scroll no matter what, even though the boy in front of them had just taken out Sasuke with hardly any effort. Recognizing their actions, Naruto immediately put his hands up in a placating manner. No. I meant that we have extras. Which do you have so that we can give you to other?" To prove his point, he pulled out 4 scrolls, all different. Shikamaru scanned over Naruto, but nothing in his actions or posture suggested that he was up to anything, and it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. He cautiously reached out and grabbed one of the earth scrolls and examined it. Finding nothing obviously wrong, he stuffed it into his pouch. "Why are you helping us, Naruto? Or Konoha ninja? We need to look out for one another. What about me? Why do they get free scrolls and I get nothing?" Kiba was back with a vengeance and looked the part as he came stomping back over to them. Naruto cursed the Inuzuka's enhanced hearing even if it wasn't as good as his own. "Because Kiba, unlike your team, Team 10 has never tried to attack me, beat me, kill me or take anything precious to me from me. Your team on the other hand beat and insulted me numerous times, attacked me without reason, and Sasuke tried to kill me, even if it was indirectly, as well as take away my possessions. Just be thankful I don't take the scroll that those sound genin left behind. Now, unless you want to fail the exam, I suggest you try to wake up your 2 friends and start looking for the other one you need." Kiba of course saw the easiest place to get the scroll he needed as being right in front of him. All 3 teams that were present had full sets of scrolls thanks to Naruto. The only problem was there were 4 of them, plus the 3 in with Ino. 8-on-1 odds was not something he would even try to take on his best of days. "Just wait till we're alone dead last. I'll show you just what I've learned since we last fought." Kiba turned on his heel and once again stalked off to his teammates, knowing that they had precious little time to find their last scroll. As Kiba went to his team, Harum came out of the hollow. "She's okay, but she's shaken. We should probably start moving soon to get her mind off things." Naruto nodded to her. "Naruto, she wants to talk to you." Not right now since I told her we would be leaving soon, but she wanted you to know that she's sorry. Sorry. For what? I don't know, she wouldn't say without starting to sob. Okay, well, we're bringing Team 10 along with us. I don't want to risk anything happening on the way to the tower. Get the others and we'll go. What about Team 7? They still need to get a scroll, and I'm not giving them handouts. They're on their own. Seems fair to me. Harem shrugged, truly not caring after what she'd seen Team 7 do. As she left to gather the women, Choji turned to Naruto. You really don't like them, do you? Would you like people who think they deserve everything without any work and try to pull their social status over you every chance they get? No, I don't like them. It's long past time they learn that they are ninja just like us, and as such they can't pull rank when there is no rank to pull. Choji grinned. Glad I'm not the only one who thinks that. It's good to know that you're on our side too, Naruto. Shikamaru always thought you were holding something back. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at the lazy genin who just smirked in return. It's pretty obvious when we consider that you could prank various ranking ninja on your own, and get away with it. The Nara said offhandedly. I just couldn't tell exactly how good you really were. Once the girls were assembled, the group was off once again, leaving a seething Kiba still trying to revive his teammates as he tried to think of how they could get their second scroll. All of the Konoha rookie teams arrived at the tower on the fourth day, save Team 7, allowing those that finished early to rest until the end of the exam. Naruto decided that this would be as good of a time as any to scout out other teams that passed trials of the forest. He roamed the halls for a while as the other Konoha genin decided to make full use of the tower's facilities to get cleaned, fed and rested. He was currently in one of the upper halls, that very few teams had made the effort to get to since there were so many stairs on the way, when he heard the all too familiar sounds of someone getting beaten. Running down the hall, he didn't have to listen hard to figure out which room his target was in as the screams easily penetrated through the door. He walked up a bit slower, so as not to alert those inside that they had an audience just yet, and put an ear to the door to clear up some of the more muffled talking coming from inside. You're pathetic, Kin. If we didn't need you to get through this damn exam, we would have already killed you days ago. Consider yourself lucky that you're getting off with this and pray that you die before Orochimaru-sama gets to you. Maybe if you're not lucky enough to escape him, you'll have the pleasure of knowing what it's like to be one of his experiments, firsthand. Naruto heard a small girlish whimper. Yeah, bitch. Slap. But that doesn't mean we won't have a little fun with you in the meantime. Maybe if we train you properly now, Orochimaru-sama will overlook our team's failure because of your idiocy. Slap wham. The sounds of the girls beating were easily distinguishable from the outside, and it made Naruto want to vomit, recalling some of his own personal encounters with other people's appendages. But then there was that name again, Orochimaru. It seemed their long-lost traitor was finally found, somewhere. Obviously the two tormentors wouldn't spill the beans without damage, but just maybe their victim would. He made up his mind, and soon the door exploded into splinters, making those inside that could shield themselves from the onslaught of wooden projectiles. What Naruto found was nothing he would ever want to see again. It seemed the two males from the sound team that attacked Team 7 were about to have their own fun with their female teammate, as she was tied up across a bed on all fours with pillows stuffed under her abdomen and a cloth gag now secured in her mouth. She didn't have on a single piece of clothing, and Naruto would have been laying on the floor out of embarrassment had he not seen the condition of her skin. All over her body there were numerous bruises, some fresh and bleeding, others old and yellow. All of them were far too reminiscent of times he wished he could have died, and he could see the same thing in her eyes that were pleading for him to help her. Either by saving her, or killing her. She didn't seem to care which. Sorry to ruin your fun, gentlemen, but I need to borrow your friend for a while. Naruto got into his taijutsu stance, knowing that they wouldn't let him just walk out with their teammate. Piss off, asshole. We're teaching this bitch a lesson, so unless you want to join in, I suggest you turn your ass around before we decide you're making us mad. Easy, Zaku. I wouldn't want you to hurt your arms any more than they already are. Said boy stiffened and hardened his eyes. How do you know about Zaku's arms? Dosu asked cautiously. And how do you know his name? Well, you see, I was overlooking your little fight with the Uchiha and I saw how nicely he smacked your partner around. Plus the fact that he is flinching every time they move is a pretty dead giveaway. I'm guessing you can't do your little palm tricks very well like that. Dosu smirked under his mask. So you know Zaku's attacks, but you don't know mine. Dosu got ready for battle as he stood between Zaku and Naruto, wriggling his arm free of his sleeve to show his weapon. Now I will show you the power of sound. Try to keep up. Dosu disappeared only to reappear right in front of Naruto already mid-swing. As the arm passed, Naruto knew something was wrong as soon as it happened. There was no way a guy that tried to stand toe-to-toe with Sasuke's reputation would miss. He took a precautionary step back and unsheathed his ninjutsu just in case a projectile came out of the strange weapon. Instead, what he got was a tingle in his ear and what felt like a light smack across his cheek. Dosu on the other hand chuckled. So it looks like you have some skill after all. I guess this will be a little more fun. Bringing his arm up, Dosu flicked it, making a quiet but high-pitched noise. One that Naruto picked up easily. But that wasn't all he picked up. There were small distortions in the air heading straight at him. Naruto dodged to the side and heard the glass on a picture behind him shatter. He took the chance to have a quick look at it and saw that where the point of the blast hit there was nothing left but sand. So this is what his Kabuto. No wonder he lost his lunch. He turned back to the smirking sound ninja. That's a nifty attack, I admit, but against someone like me it's worthless. And yet you cowered in the treetops when we fought Uchiha Sasuke. Actually, I was hoping you'd kill him. Naruto chuckled a bit, confusing the two boys. The Tem and I don't exactly see eye to eye on a lot of things. Had you stayed a bit longer though, you would have been able to see something interesting. We already know about the mark. I meant me beating the crap out of your target. Dosu and Zaku took a step back in surprise. I am impossible. Think what you want, but if you fight me now you will see just what I can do. Naruto once again took up a stance. This time Kenjutsu with his ninjutsu parallel to the floor as he narrowed his eyes. Come on Dosu, he's gotta be bluffing. Why would he attack his own? These Konoha nin are too soft for that. Zaku moved up to his teammate and swung an arm up to Dosu's shoulder, palm open and facing Naruto. The pain from the action was written across his face but he kept his focus. Alright. Dosu shook himself out of his stunned state and readied a second attack. It's now 2-on-1. How long can you last? Naruto didn't even blink. 5 seconds. Well, at least you know your limits. Fine, in 5 seconds you will be begging for death. There was an explosion as Zaku released his Zenkaha at Naruto from feet away. Then it was almost a replay of their fight with Sasuke as Naruto appeared behind the two. I didn't mean you would beat me in 5 seconds. I meant that in 5 seconds you both would be taking a nice nap. He spun on his heel and ducked under the two attempts to swing at him, then followed through as the pommel of his sword struck them both in the side of the head, sending them into blissful darkness. They crumpled where they stood and didn't move other than the small signs of uneven breathing, showing that they were still among the living. This makes 3. Shaking his head, Naruto sheathed his ninjutsu as he walked over to Kin. Stopping at the bed closest to him, he picked up a sheet and held it in front of him as he walked to her, blocking his view of her displayed form. As his shins hit the bed she was tied to, he draped the sheet over her before tending to her bindings. Again he found evidence that this couldn't have been her first time being tied up, as there were bruises of at least 2 other types of bindings on her arms and legs. After she was freed, he removed her gag and helped her get slowly to her feet. She winced at each movement but eventually made it until she was upright and facing him. Kin looked down in shame. She was used to the humiliation from her teammates, but to be so exposed in front of a complete stranger who just saved her from a fate worse than the usual beating was a bit too much. For some reason though, she felt a little angry that he hadn't offered to join in. A man strong enough to not only take out both of her teammates, but also take out the Uchiha that had apparently beaten them with ease when they weren't injured. It made her wonder if she was just too unattractive now that her body was ruined so many times. She barely registered that he had spoke to her and looked up into his eyes. Eyes that she had to take a step back from when she saw just how deep they were. Sure, she had seen her own eyes when she looked in the mirror, but hers were nowhere near as dead as his. What? I said, are you alright? Well, aside from the bruises. He sounded generally concerned for her. If you're well enough, I need you to answer some questions for me. So that was it. He was after information. I need to know about Orochimaru. And the worst information he could ask her to give. Well, she had already failed her lord, there was little hope for her now anyway. The least she could do would be to put the biggest kink in his plans that she could. He wants T2. She choked. She couldn't do it after all and got ready for the interrogation techniques to begin as she screwed her eyes shut, but the pain never came. Instead she heard his footsteps as he walked away and she opened her eyes. Get dressed then meet me outside. It's not safe for you to stay with them. He kicked Dosu's heel as he passed to emphasize who he meant before closing the door behind him. She was surprised to see that both of her teammates were tied up, but not in any way that they couldn't get out of with a few minutes of work. He stood outside patiently as he waited for her to finish. It took a while but eventually she emerged once again dressed in her ninja garb. Still wincing at most of her movements. Can you walk? I think I can limp. She answered sheepishly. Naruto nodded and picked her up carefully. Before taking off down the hall. In minutes they were back outside the room that teams 8, 10 and 11 women were using. Setting Kin down he knocked on the door and they waited as they heard shuffling inside. When the door opened Kin was shocked to see a beautiful pale-eyed girl in a long shirt. Hinata is everyone decent. After spending so much time around him, Hinata could easily recognize the urgency in his voice. She took a peek around the room inside where most of the girls were either cleaning weapons or reading. Yes, it's fine. I think I was the only one sleeping. Naruto smiled. Sorry for waking you Hinata-chan. Naruto leaned over and kissed her causing her to blush a little at being kissed in front of a stranger. When they parted she let him in, alerting the others of their guests. Harume looked up from her weapons cleaning and raised an eyebrow. Another one Naruto. Isn't two enough for you? Kin looked over to him as he scratched his head. Ladies, this is Kin. You may remember her as one of the sound team that attacked Team 7. A nose head shot up from the bed that she was currently curled up on with a book and she glared at the newcomer. The girl was all too familiar with her as she could recall her brief mind switch with the girl. You. She narrowed her eyes and got up from her bed pointing at the girl who shrunk behind Naruto, latching onto his arm in a death grip. Calm down Ino, she was just through a rather traumatic event. She looks fine to me. Ino snuffed. She went through worse than you did recently. Naruto growled and Ino backed up from the harsh sound of his voice before putting her head down. I'm sorry. She whispered. Naruto sighed and ran a hand through his hair, slightly frustrated. Listen, I need you to keep her here with you while I go look for someone. We have a situation and I need to make sure the information she has gets to the right people, so I need you to keep her safe. Don't let anyone through that door unless it's myself, one of your teammates or your sensei. I don't care who they say they are. And if any of those people come they are to stay here with you and help guard her. Is that clear? The urgency of his words caught them off guard and they quickly agreed. Good. Hinata, Hikushi's hurt. Take her to the bathroom and clean her up please. I'll be back as soon as possible. After peeling Kin off his arm and handing her over to the care of his girlfriends he was once again out the door. The girl looked lost standing in front of so many eyes. Eyes that she was sure were analyzing her. To Kin's surprise it was Ino that came up to her first. She flinched under the girl's gaze but screamed out in pain when Ino hugged her tightly. Ino dropped her quickly freaking out. I didn't do anything I swear. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She tried to convince everyone as she fretted over the girl, trying to help her without touching her. Kin just sank to her knees crying as Hinata and Haku rushed over. The two looked her over, lifting up her shirt a bit before quickly dropping it as they blanched. Haku looked over to the now sobbing Ino. It's okay Ino. She was beaten, you didn't know. It's not your fault. She didn't know if the words helped since Ino didn't stop crying, instead the amount of tears had increased when she saw the bruises. Haku and Hinata quickly but carefully helped Kin back to her feet and took her to the bathroom. They soon had her stripped once again, though she allowed them to do so reluctantly. They were appalled by the extent of her injuries but tried not to show it in case she wanted to cover up and not let them near her to start the healing. They used their limited healing jutsu on the cuts and bruises before applying some salves while drawing a bath. The salves would lessen the pain of the injuries when they started cleaning her off, as well as fight any possible infections. Once they had enough water they began to sponge her down gently, being especially careful around her bruises and cuts. She flinched every now and then, but Kin knew that they were being as gentle as they could so she just bit her lip and took the pain. It was a lot less than when she was getting beaten and if she could survive that she could survive this. About halfway through Ino walked in causing Kin to tense, but the girl just bowed low while whispering, I'm sorry. And placed a new set of clothes on the counter. Kin could see the redness in her eyes as they looked at each other. He said I had it worse than her. Does that mean she was beaten recently? She was shaken from her thoughts though as Hinata and Haku lifted her and helped her into the bath to soak for a bit, each placing some kind of plant or another into the water around her. It was strange and she almost felt like they were preparing her for dinner, but once the aroma of the herbs reached her nose she instantly felt her body relax, and was so dangerously close to slipping into sleep and falling under the water when she heard a light splash as Ino joined her in the tub while Hinata and Haku continued to prepare medicines. Ino rested herself against the inside of the tub before pulling Kin into her. The girl was far too weak to resist though, and settled for relaxing into the blonde-haired beauty. Ino rested her chin on Kin's shoulder, being careful not to touch any bruises this time, and began to tell her story into the Oto Kunoichi's ear in whispers. They both sobbed a little, but the overwhelming aroma of the bath took control and they simply rested against each other, and soaked. Haku and Hinata didn't let them rest too long though as they were soon pulled out of their relaxation and Ino helped the other two apply more salve onto Kin. After they were finished and Ino and Kin were both dressed, they rejoined the rest of the group in the main room finding Shino and Shikamaru now occupying it as well as the two sat talking to Harum. Naruto was hard-pressed to find anyone he wanted to see. The arena was empty, no one was in the halls and even the cafeteria was bare. He was about to just ditch the exam and go straight to the Hokage, but just as he was about to leave the tower he heard a familiar voice call out to him. "Ma, Naruto-san, where are you going? If you leave now you automatically forfeit the exam, which means you and Haku would both fail. Don't make any hasty decisions please." Naruto turned in relief to see Kakashi leaning against the wall casually reading his book. "Ah, Kakashi-san, not who I was looking for, but you'll do." Kakashi lifted his head considering whether he should knock some sense into the boy for showing such disrespect, but decided now was not the time when he saw Naruto's face. "Listen, I need you to go to Hokage-sama as fast as you can and bring him here. I have important information that he needs to know. If he asks what it is, just tell him that I just gained a little insight to an old snake's whereabouts that he was looking for. Naruto, it might help if you were a little more descriptive. No time. Just go, he'll understand what I mean. When he gets here tell him to come straight to room 205. I'll be waiting there until he shows no matter how long it takes, go." Kakashi would have normally put a genin in its place for demanding such a thing, but he had already experienced Naruto's abilities before. If nothing else the boy was serious, so with a nod he shunshined out of the building and sped off towards the Hokage tower with his message as Naruto rushed back to the room that the Konoha ladies were residing in. When he arrived he was relieved to see that everything was still in one piece and the girls along with Shino and Shikamaru were all talking, although in slightly hushed tones, while Choji sat nearby and munched on some chips. "Sorry I took so long, but I had a hell of a time finding someone that could help me. Kin, when the person I contacted comes we're probably going to need to go to a different room for a little questioning." He saw the girl tense and her eyes began to water. "I won't let them do anything to you and as long as you don't give them reason to they won't hurt you, but you have to tell them everything you know." "Hi, Naruto-sama." Kin bowed before latching onto his arm and hiding behind his back partially, confusing everyone in the room. Kin had learned his name during Ino's little story and was grateful for their actions today, but while the rest of the people in the room had been unusually nice to her, he was ultimately the one that saved her from a fate worse than death and possibly death itself as well. As such he was now her shield. Kin, Naruto is fine. You protected me when I thought no one would. Would you prefer Naruto Dono?" Now everyone was feeling a bit uncomfortable, especially Haku and Hinata. Naruto slowly peeled Kin off of him. A bit difficult considering how reluctant she was to let go, but eventually got free of her. "Look Kin, I don't think my girlfriends would appreciate you hanging onto me like that. And as much as I would love to protect you I don't think hanging onto my side all the time is a very safe way to do it." He pointed at the two obviously angry ladies who were already marching over to him. As they walked up to him they pounced and were soon latched onto Naruto protectively showing just who he belonged to. "Yeah, they can get a little jealous." He chuckled as all three girls and surprisingly Ino, though no one noticed the latter, pouted. Earning another chuckle. "I see, then I will serve you in any way that they will allow me to. I owe my life and well-being to you and it is a debt that I will try to repay in full." An uncomfortable silence filled the room for the next few minutes until there was an urgent knock at the door. Shikamaru opened it since he was the closest, unoccupied person. Upon seeing who it was he casually turned to the rest. Troublesome, Naruto, I'm guessing this is who you sent for. He let the door swing open and revealed a Sandame, Kakashi, Ibiki and an oddly stressed-looking Anko. There were many wide eyes in the room, but none as open as Kin's as she started to realize just how serious this was going to be. Naruto-kun, I'm told you found something on that snake that I lost. Care to enlighten us? The old man looked around the room until his eyes fell on Kin, who he noticed was hiding once again behind Naruto as if she wanted to disappear. Naruto shifted out from his two girls and brought Kin forward. Hokage-sama, this is Kin from Oto, and I believe you would be very interested in what she has to say, but I would suggest we do this elsewhere. I have a feeling the information is something you don't want to be too public. He looked apologetically back at his friends. Ino, I want you to come along too. You have information that also needs to be discussed. Ino flinched but followed as the four older ninja lead them out into the tower. They made their way to a sub-basement where there were many seals and security measures in place to ensure privacy. Once on the level they desired, the Jonin and Hokage chose a room at random and lead Naruto and Kin inside, but told Kakashi and Ino to wait outside, closing and locking the door behind them. The two genin were instructed to sit, which they did, while the adults moved in front of them. Now Naruto, what did you learn about Orochimaru, and what does this girl have to do with it? It was Kin that managed to shakily answer after bowing slightly. Hokage-sama, my name is Tsuchi Kin. I am from Otogakure where Orochimaru-sam. Orochimaru is the leader. This made all three of the elder ninjas stiffen at the name. We were sent here to take the Chunin exams, but we were also given the mission to kill Uchiha Sasuke. A task which we failed miserably at. I was knocked unconscious before I had a chance to see him, but I found out later that Orochimaru gave him his 10 no Juin. Now Anko flinched the most as she instinctively pressed a hand to her neck. An act Naruto easily caught the meaning of. I don't know Orochimaru's motives in this, but from what I can guess, he wanted us to test him. And why are you telling us this? What do you get out of it? Kin flinched at Ibiki's harsh tone, but stood up before turning her back to them and lifting her shirt to let them see all the bruises and freshly patched scrapes that littered her back. She looked at them over her shoulder. What reason do I have to protect them? She asked with dead eyes. Sarutobi nodded and motioned her to lower her shirt. It sickened him that such a child could be beaten like this, but he glanced at Naruto and remembered that he had seen far, far worse before. Tsuchi Kin, due to your involvement in this plot you will be detained, but not until after these exams as I wish to see how this plays out. You will be supervised, and once you are finished you will be detained until we can investigate this fully. Kin nodded knowing that it was a deal she couldn't argue over. And she squeezed Naruto's hand for comfort as she settled back down into her chair. If there is nothing else for you to tell at the moment, then I believe Ibiki has some news for Naruto before we bring in the other two. Ibiki stepped forward. Naruto-san, we would like to thank you for your warning, and we sent a tale along with the one you requested, but they haven't been heard from in over 3 days. This of course leads us to believe your suspicions are correct and we are assigning them a stronger shadow in hopes to catch him in any unfavorable acts. As of now though we have no solid proof one way or another, so all we can do is sit back and watch him. Kin was thoroughly confused at that, but Naruto simply nodded. What about the other gifts I sent you? Oh, we got a nice bit of information from those two birds. It seems they really were what they seemed though, so they only knew what they were here for. It was still a big help. I'll want to talk to you later about that. Whatever you did to them before they got to us must have been impressive. One we didn't even have to touch and the other only needed a little help before she sang. Ibiki could only look at the boy with a calculating gaze as he spoke. He knew many methods of torture that could be used to get information, but they weren't taught to academy students or genin. That was a specific field that one had to go into, so how the blonde had acquired any knowledge was almost beyond his imagination. He did suspect that it had something to do with what he had told the two interrogators down in Orochimaru's lair months ago. I see, and will any actions be taken? This time it was the Hokage that answered. Because of the number of mind-altering techniques we have, namely the Sharingan and the Yamanaka clan techniques, it would be difficult for us to prove anything without physical evidence. Thus the reason for the Hyuga incident nearly a decade ago. Had they succeeded in their goals and then we caught them, then we may have been able to make a case. I'm sorry Naruto, said Genin, just sighed, a little dismayed at the news. It's okay Gigi-san. I'd rather them get away with what they did than have Hinata-chan have to live with that evidence. The old man nodded as he signaled for Anko to let the other two in, now that the first issue had finished being discussed. Kakashi walked in with a nervous Ino. They could tell she didn't want to be there, but she put on a brave front and sat next to Naruto. Now what is this second bit of information you have for us Naruto? Inquired Sarutobi. Gigi-san, Kin already told you about Sasuke's newly acquired condition. It seems to have changed him and not for the better. My team and Team 8 were overlooking the clearing where the Sound team was engaging Team 7 and 10. We watched as a strange purple aura formed around Sasuke and black marks appeared to cover his skin. Once he managed to chase off the Sound Genin, he decided to, I assume, enact part of his ambition right there in the forest. The part one refer to is the restoration of his clan. He took Ino-san and Sakura-san into a hollow of a tree. What he did in there I don't know, but Ino-san can probably fill you in on that in a moment. After a couple minutes I saw a flash of blonde hair and heard a scream. At that point I knew the Tem was taking things a little too far and I decided it was time for me to intervene. He must have seen me coming and I'm guessing he decided beating me was more important since he immediately rushed out to engage me. After a brief talk of how he was going to beat me then use all the girls present to revive his clan, including Hinata-chan, Haku-chan and Haruum-san, and knocking Kiba away when he came into the picture, we exchanged blows and it ended with him unconscious. Afterward Pinky, Sakura-san, rushed out to him clad in only her lower underwear and, on her way past me, she attempted to get some revenge for her little boy toy. I simply stuck a leg out which she was apparently too slow to dodge and it ended up with her knocked out right next to the Uchiha. After that short battle I entered the hollow and found Ino in a similar state of dress that Sakura had been in, so I called my teammate, along with Team 8's female members, to tend to her while I gave them some privacy. Naruto's eyes narrowed more and more over the course of his story as the hatred in his voice was easily distinguishable. He had also at one point made a threat to take the Hokage title by force, though he is far from having enough power to take such an action. See. That is problematic. Ino-chan, what can you fill in for us? They all looked to her, making her obviously very uncomfortable, but Sarutobi smiled gently at her. Take your time if you need. We can wait a little while. Naruto gave her hand a little squeeze to let her know he was still there, which sent a comforting shiver up her spine. Taking a deep breath she began. We engaged the Sound Ninja to try to save Sakura, who I used to consider a friend, and Sasuke, who was unconscious at the time. We weren't holding up well until Sasuke came to, and decimated them. Then he picked up Sakura and myself and took us into the hollow. At first I was happy about it, but then I realized that he was just using us. Sakura didn't seem to care, but I decided I didn't want such a thing. I tried to leave, but he grabbed me, and forced me back inside. Then he threatened me and told me that if I didn't remove my clothing he would do it himself. She took a moment to gather herself up before continuing. The others in the room waited patiently just as they told her they would. With that sickening aura he had I was afraid and started to undress. Once I was, in a similar state to Sakura, whose clothes he had ripped off, he grabbed me. It was just after that when he saw Naruto out in the clearing. Sasuke growled his name and rushed out of the hollow. The next thing I remember was rushing over to the next person that came into the hollow and hugging them. I could tell it wasn't Sasuke, so anything had to be better than what he was going to do. Looking back I guess I was lucky it wasn't someone else who would want to hurt me. After he got me off of him I realized it was Naruto, and pieces of the fight came back slowly. I didn't want him to leave me, but he got the other girls to come in and help me redress. Ino had to stop as she began to cry and once again was holding onto Naruto as she buried her head in his shoulder. Meanwhile the Hokage was glaring at Kakashi. Without looking he addressed the three genin. Naruto, take those two back to your friends. You are to watch over them until the end of this exam. I have to have a few words with Team 7 sensei. Everyone could easily sense the danger rolling off the man's tongue as he continued to stare the Cyclopean ninja into a corner. The genin quickly rushed out of the room, thankful to be away from the oppressive aura. as they ran the whole way back to room 205. When they got there, Naruto went to enter the room, but Ino held him back and waved Kin on, who did so although a bit reluctantly. "What is it, Ino-san?" To his surprise, Ino got on her knees and bowed to him. He hurriedly pulled her back to her feet and looked around to see if anyone was there to see it. When he looked back, he could see tears dripping from her eyes. "I'm sorry." "What do you have to be sorry for, Ino? You were the victim, it's the Tem that should be apologizing." Ino just shook her head. "No. I'm sorry for being such a bitch. I'm sorry for calling you names. I'm sorry for thinking you were weak. And an idiot. And worthless. Most of all, I'm sorry for not realizing what a complete and utter asshole Sasuke was. If I could have just looked past him." She rushed into his arms once again, but this time didn't stop at hugging him. Her lips crashed into his as he stood stunned to the spot for a minute. Naruto pulled back quickly once he realized what was going on. Ino. You don't have to go that far. Listen, you're just a bit confused after a traumatic event. I'm happy that you see Sasuke for what he is now, but I already have Haku and Hinata. I don't think they would be happy knowing I'm out in the hall kissing another girl. Exactly, you have two already, so what's the problem with having another? I don't care, and neither should they since they're sharing you already. She tried to get close to him once again, but he kept her at bay. She couldn't understand it how one guy forced her to be close to him while another was now forcing her away. Listen, Ino. You're confused right now. Take some time to get your emotions sorted out and then we can work on friendship. I can't go further than that though, out of respect for Hinata and Haku. Now let's go inside and we'll have some nice company and try to get our minds off recent events. Okay. He said calmly and smiled as Ino nodded, though the determined look in her eyes made him a bit uncomfortable. Regardless, he opened the door for her and they made their way inside to hang out for the remainder of their time in the tower. Kakashi, what the hell have you been teaching your genin this whole time? Sarutobi was roaring at the copy ninja in outrage. You told us you were teaching them teamwork and knocking their attitudes out of them. If you even try to make up one of your lame excuses, I'll disband you from active duty before we leave this room. Kakashi was backed against the wall in fear. He was more ashamed of his team now than ever, but in front of the Hokage's rage none of that seemed to matter much. He knelt on the floor in a show of submission before he addressed the older man. Hokage-sama. I did everything that was in my power. From what they showed me, they were working better together, and I thought I had started to quell their emotions. Even Inoichi said that Sasuke's mental state seemed better than on his first examination, though he was astonished that it had degraded so much over the years. There was no indication coming into these exams that they were anything but a normal team aside from a few tense moments, specifically when in view of Naruto. I ask that you confirm that with your Anbu and Yamanaka-sama himself. He bowed his head again. Hokage-sama. Hiruzen turned towards the new voice and met Anko's eyes. What is it, Anko? He snapped a little harshly. Sasuke's actions could have been due to his cursed mark. It isn't something that is healthy to have. If Sakura follows his actions as much as it seems, then it would stand to reason that she is blinded by whatever he does. Perhaps she should be examined by Yamanaka-san as well. Sarutobi sighed. He knew she was right and he had unjustly accused Kakashi of being lazy. Not that anyone would have blamed him for doing so. Yes, I suppose you're right. I apologize, Kakashi, for now. If I find out you have been slacking though, rest assured you will be punished alongside your team. Kakashi gulped and nodded that he understood. Now I believe we all have things to do here. Kakashi, make sure your team stays in line or so help me, I'll send the three of them back to the academy if not worse. That said, the Hokage stormed out of the room, followed shortly after by the rest of them. Morning came and all of the contestants were told to meet in the main arena at noon. Until then they just hung out, played games and did some light sparring, which according to Naruto was so they won't get soft from relaxing for a day. 10 minutes until noon they made their way to the arena where the rest of the teams that had passed were waiting and got into lines according to teams. It was mostly Konoha genin including Kabuto's team, whom Naruto eyed warily. There was also the Suna team which looked a bit bored and the Oto team that seemed to be looking warily and a little pissed at Naruto. Last was a team from Kurigakure, two of which looked to be in high spirits. With only a few minutes until noon the arena doors crashed open and Team 7 waltzed in with Sasuke leading the pack. The Avenger looked around at all those present thinking on how badly he could beat each on until his eyes landed on Naruto. His fists clenched and he started off towards the blonde, but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. He looked up into the face of his sensei and sneered. Let go of me, I need to teach the Dobi a lesson. Kakashi glared down at his pupil in disgust. No, I think you've taught us enough about yourself with your recent actions. Now get in line and shut the hell up or I'll take you out of this exam myself and you'll be doing D-rank missions until you start acting like a true shinobi. That is if I decide to allow you to stay as a ninja. You can't do that to Sasuke-kun. He is the best ninja in the village. Everyone cringed at the volume and pitch of the Haruno's voice. She had apparently brought along spare clothes. Most likely hoping that staying clean would impress the Uchiha. Both of you shut the hell up or I'll remove you from this arena right now as is in my right as your sensei. Now this is your last chance. Get in line and behave or you're out of here. Sasuke leered at the gray-haired man. You will regret this Hitaki, count on it. With a last huff he turned and went to the end of the rows to start a new one for his team just as the noon buzzer rang. The Hokage looked over the group in front of him and forced a smile. He had hoped the Uchiha wouldn't make it here, but that was not the case, and the presence of Kabuto was rather concerning as well. I congratulate you all on making it to the tower on time. Now I will tell you the true purpose of these exams. The Hokage went into a slightly long speech about the politics behind the upcoming matches and how they would be reflecting on their country's strengths. When he was finished and about to send them on their ways, a sickly ninja walked up and interrupted him. Excuse me Hokage-sama but as the proctor of the final stage of these exams there is something I need to take care of first. The old man nodded to him and stepped aside giving him the floor. My name is Gecko Hayate and I will be your final proctor for these exams. Before we can let you all leave today however, there is a small matter that needs taken care of. With so many important individuals coming to Konoha to watch the main matches we would rather not keep them waiting around for more than a day if we don't have to. Since the matches will be set up in a single elimination tournament style we are going to have the preliminary matches now in order to lessen the numbers of contestant in the main matches. Cries of outrage came mainly from Team 7 since they had only just gotten there straight from the forest. They looked the part too as they were the dirtiest in the room, but their cries were quickly put out with a glare from their sensei, promising to keep good on his threat if they didn't settle down. If anyone feels that they would be unable to continue with the fight they may leave now. Just raise your hand and you will be escorted to the village. Only 2 people put their hands up. One was a Kiri nin who looked like he was about to fall over any minute, the other made many in the room suspicious. Kabuto had his hand up, and was claiming that the last fight he had to go through in the forest took too much out of him and he made a show of limping away from the group. This of course didn't fool a few of those in the room and Sarutobi shifted his eyes to a window where a hidden Anbu would be, signaling that he should follow the boy. Well, now if there is no one else, these matches will be decided by this board behind me in a random draw. Those not participating in the current match will move to the balconies at the sides until their names are called. A match does not begin until I say and it only ends when your opponent is dead, forfeits or I call the match at which point you will immediately stop. If you do not stop you risk an automatic forfeiture to the main matches no matter how well you did. Hayate finished his speech and looked at the board with everyone following his lead as the first names shuffled into view. Uchiha Sasuke and Akato Yoroi stay on the floor. Everyone else please proceed to the balconies. All the genin moved into place to watch or participate in the first match of the day. You may not like how I'm getting the pairings with Naruto set up since they aren't all just lovey-dovey, but this is a world of ninja, hardly anything can really be considered normal when any moment can be your last. For Ino it was a harsh look back on how Naruto treated everyone in respect to how he was treated, and comparing it to Sasuke. Since she had never done so before, it only became glaringly obvious to her now. Combine that with him saving her and you get an overwhelming whirlpool of emotions. Kin on the other hand grew up in Oto where every day was most likely a struggle. Being beaten and humiliated for so long, when she was given a glimmer of hope for a different life she grabbed onto it, literally, and hung on. She isn't technically even remotely in love with Naruto, but she sees him as her protector and guardian. She still fears her teammates and Orochimaru, but since she has little hope of surviving the snake's wrath, she's hoping for a little happiness before her time comes. Another side note, Kiba was not planning on raping Hinata. He was just supposed to be able to have dibs on her affections after Naruto was out of the picture. He's not as bad as the Uchiha in that aspect. Some of the preliminary matches will be pretty much the same as canon. That may be in part because I am a little lazy and don't feel like being too creative, but I also feel that I'm switching it up enough in other fights to even things out. One more thing, don't worry about pieces of put-in that are seemingly unfinished or forgotten about. I assure you they are not and will show up later. I.e., the cursed mark inspection. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.